If you already have the Insta360 X5, the new Insta360 X6 creates a pretty interesting problem. On paper, this looks like a major upgrade. We're getting bigger sensors, 8K at 50 frames per second, 10-bit color, Dolby Vision, better battery life, faster charging, faster file transfers, and a bunch of new AI features. But here's the thing. The X5 is already a really good 360 camera, so the real question isn't whether the X6 is better. Of course it is. The question is whether those improvements are actually big enough to justify replacing an X5 that you already own. And after looking at what has changed, and more importantly what hasn't, we think the answer depends a lot more on how you shoot than you might expect. Let's start with the biggest hardware change, because this is probably the upgrade that matters the most. The X6 moves to dual 1.1-inch sensors, compared with the dual 1.28-inch sensors in the X5. Insta360 says the new sensors give you about 33% more sensor area and significantly more light intake. And this is important because with a 360 camera, low light performance has always been one of those areas where you notice the limitations pretty quickly. The X5 already made a pretty big improvement over older generations, especially with pure video, but the X6 is trying to push that even further. In difficult lighting, at dusk, during nighttime rides, or when you're dealing with bright lights and dark shadows in the same shot, the larger sensors give the X6 more room to work with. Now, we do want to keep our expectations realistic here. Some of the early side-by-side footage doesn't show this massive difference that you might expect just from looking at the sensor specs. In normal daylight, the X5 can still look extremely close to the X6. Even in some nighttime comparisons, you have to stop the footage and really look closely to spot the difference. So we wouldn't say the X6 suddenly makes the X5 bad. It doesn't. What the X6 really does is raise the ceiling, especially when the lighting gets difficult. And that's a much more useful way to look at this upgrade. Speaking of video quality, the X6 also takes the maximum 360 video resolution from 8K 30 on the X5 to 8K 50. And honestly, this is one of those upgrades that makes more sense once you actually think about how we use a 360 camera. We're not just recording and watching the entire 360 image. A lot of the time, we're reframing that footage into a normal flat video. So having 8K resolution gives us plenty of room to crop and reposition the shot, while 50 frames per second gives us smoother motion and more flexibility when we're shooting action. If you're filming bikes, motorcycles, skiing, hiking, vehicles, or anything with a lot of movement, that extra frame rate can be genuinely useful. And then there's color. This is probably one of the biggest reasons serious creators should pay attention to the X6. The X5 already gave us excellent footage, but the X6 adds 10-bit color, iLog, and native Dolby Vision. That means the camera can capture significantly more color information, which gives us more flexibility when we're grading footage later. If you're the kind of person who shoots, exports, and uploads without touching the footage much, you probably won't care that much. But if we're taking the footage into a more serious editing workflow, trying to recover highlights, work with shadows, or match the X6 with other cameras, this is a much more meaningful upgrade. And that brings us to another big difference. The X6 is starting to feel less like just a 360 camera and more like a complete shooting system. You can shoot full 360 footage, use the single lens modes, or use Instaframe to get a more traditional flat video without having to worry about framing everything perfectly while you're recording. In other words, we can basically capture everything first and worry about the final composition later. That's still one of the biggest advantages of owning a good 360 camera in the first place, and the X6 takes that concept even further. Battery life is another area where the X6 gets a pretty noticeable upgrade. The new 2600 mAh battery is rated for up to 140 minutes of 8K 30 recording, compared with roughly 88 minutes for the X5 under the comparable rating. And in real-world testing, the X6 has been showing a small efficiency advantage as well. More importantly, the charging is much faster. Early testing showed the X6 reaching a full charge in around 20 minutes, compared with roughly 30 minutes for the X5. So if we're out shooting all day, that can make a real difference. We can spend less time sitting around waiting for batteries and more time actually filming. The X6 also gets a surprisingly useful upgrade that you might not notice immediately: faster file transfers. Early side-by-side testing found roughly 32 megabytes per second on the X6 compared with around 17 megabytes per second on the X5. That's almost twice as fast, and when we're dealing with huge 360 files, this matters. If you regularly transfer footage to your phone, computer, or cloud storage, cutting that waiting time down can make the whole workflow feel much better. There are also some smaller hardware changes that we actually like. The X6 is more compact, and the camera feels noticeably smaller when you actually hold it. That's great for travel, mounting, and carrying it around. But there is a trade-off. Some early users have pointed out that the X5's larger screen gave them a better view of themselves while shooting. So even though the X6 is smaller overall, that doesn't automatically mean every part of the design is better. Sometimes you give up a little usability in one area to gain it somewhere else. Storage is another nice improvement. The X6 includes built-in storage, giving us roughly 47 gigabytes of usable space before even adding a micro SD card. That's one of those features we might not appreciate until the day we forget our memory card. It doesn't replace having a proper high-capacity card for serious shooting, but as a backup, it's extremely convenient. Then we have the software and AI side of things. Insta360 has been pushing hard on AI editing, and the X6 takes that further with AI Director, Auto Edit 2.0, and other automated editing features designed to take a pile of 360 footage and turn it into something usable without making us manually reframe every clip. For casual creators, this could honestly be more valuable than some of the camera hardware upgrades. Because let's be real, shooting 360 footage is easy. Going through hours of 360 footage afterward is where things can get painful. The X6 also gets tougher replaceable lenses, improved cooling, and better waterproofing, with the camera rated for up to 20 meters without a case. The replaceable lens system is still one of the best things about this lineup, because we don't have to treat a scratched lens like a death sentence for the camera. So, should we upgrade from the X5? If you're buying your first 360 camera, we'd absolutely look at the X6. It's the more capable camera, and the combination of larger sensors, 8K 50, 10-bit color, better battery performance, and faster workflow makes it a very complete package. But if you already own an X5, this gets much harder. If most of your footage is shot during the day, you're happy with 8K 30, you don't do much color grading, and the X5 is already doing everything you need, there's no reason to rush out and replace it. The X5 is still an excellent camera, and early comparisons show just how close the two can look in normal shooting conditions. Where we would seriously consider the X6 is if you shoot a lot at night, need smoother 8K footage, want 10-bit and iLog for a more professional workflow, or simply want the better battery and faster file transfer experience. Those are the areas where we think you'll actually notice the difference. So, is the Insta360 X6 worth upgrading to from the X5? For a new buyer, we'd say yes. For an existing X5 owner, we'd call it more of a premium upgrade than a necessary one. The X6 raises the bar, but it doesn't suddenly make the X5 obsolete. And honestly, that might be the most important thing to know before spending the money. If your X5 is still doing the job, there's no reason to feel like you're missing out. But if you've been waiting for better low light performance, higher frame rates, 10-bit, and a faster overall workflow, the X6 finally gives us a pretty convincing reason to make the jump.